Mafia Boss's son rejected the food cooked by all except the one cooked by the waitress. New Avalon bleeds neon. It is a city that never really sleeps. It just coughs itself into a damp quiet around 4 in the morning. The bay breathes fog onto the asphalt, making the reflections of the noodle shops and bail bond signs smear like watercolor. This is my town, and at the Blue Comet Diner. I was just trying to survive closing. My name is Juniper Reyes. June. The name sounds soft, but I am not. You cannot be soft when you are pulling a double, smelling like fried onions and stale coffee, trying to make next month's rent. The Comet was my stage, and I was deep in the closing act, flipping chairs onto tables, my worn-out sneakers squeaking on the mop tile. The bell above the door crashed open, sucking the humid night air inside. It was Tate, our manager, looking like he had just seen a ghost that owed him money. "June, drop the mop. We got a call." I did not drop the mop. I slid it into the bucket. "Tate, my shift ended 20 minutes ago. I am clocked out." "This is not a shift. June, this is an opportunity, a gig, a really, really weird gig." He was twisting the end of his tie, the Sable Lantern, their cellar tasting. I stopped. The Sable Lantern was not our world. It was where shadows wore bespoke suits and the wine cost more than my car. They need a waitress. Tate laughed, a high, nervous sound. They need a cook. Apparently, every high-end chef in this city has failed. They called us as a last resort. Desperation. They are paying triple rates. Cash, just for an hour. Something prickled on my neck. Failure at the Sable Lantern did not mean a burnt steak. It meant something else. Failed what? Tate. To cook for a kid? The air in the diner suddenly felt too thick. We were driven there in a black car that did not look like a taxi. It smelled like new leather and quiet menace. The Sable Lantern was all dark wood and velvet ropes. We were hustled down to the cellar, a space that smelled of old brick, expensive cigars, and fear. The room was silent. A long table, maybe 30 grand worth of rejected food covering it, tiny. Perfect quails, foams I could not name, pastas sculpted into shapes I had never seen. And at the end of this culinary graveyard sat the man whose face was only ever seen in grainy surveillance photos. Ardan Lucero. He was the syndicate, the harbor, the shipping, the parts of New Avalon that moved under the surface. He was not large, but he owned the gravity in the room. His suit was perfect, his stillness absolute. Beside him, in a chair that seemed too big, sat a small boy, 9 years old, maybe. He had his father's dark hair and a silence that was louder than any tantrum. This was Ivo Lucero, a woman with a tight bun and an earpiece. Mara Quell intercepted Tate. Her voice was a razor blade wrapped in silk. The parameters were clear. The boy has not eaten in 24 hours. This is the last attempt before we call it. Tate, trying to sound professional, just squeaked, "My best line cook quit last week, but June, she's, resourceful." I ignored them. I was watching the boy. Ivo was not looking at the food. He was staring at the heavy silver fork by his plate. Mara Quell drifted closer to me, her eyes scanning me like I was a threat. She leaned in. Her whisper meant only for me, cold and clinical. "The boy will not eat from strangers. Not after the incident at his school. There was violence. He has psychological trauma. He associates new food with danger." I saw the main event chef, a man with a Michelin star and a face like a furious tomato, rip off his tall white hat. He threw his apron on the floor. "I am done. I cooked him filet. I made him saffron risotto. I even made him silver dollar pancakes with imported maple. The boy is broken. I will not be insulted." He stormed out. The room tightened. Ardan Lucero had not moved, had not even blinked. He just watched the empty doorway where the chef had been. Tate grabbed my arm, his hand sweaty. "June, please. You used to cook at the children's hospital. Right, the psych ward benefit, kids." I looked at Ardan Lucero. Then I looked at Ivo. The boy looked haunted, starved, but terrified to eat. I knew that look. I had seen it at St. Halcyon's. I nodded once. Pulling my arm from Tate's grasp, I walked not to the main prep station, but to the stainless steel trolley holding the rejected dishes. I did not look at the fancy constructions. I leaned in and smelled truffle oil, saffron, foie gras, aged balsamic. It was all loud. It was all aggressive. It was food meant to impress, not to comfort. It smelled like ego. I turned to the kitchen porter who was trying to look invisible in the corner. "Where is your staff pantry? The basics, not this." He pointed to a steel door. I went inside. It was clean, organized, and it had the building blocks, sacks of cornmeal, a bag of calabaza squash, onions, soy sauce, eggs. I did not ask permission. I tied my hair back tighter, found a clean apron, and washed my hands until they were raw. I found a heavy pot. I did not care about the suits watching me. I did not care about Ardan Lucero's reputation. I only saw the kid. I started moving. I diced the squash small, sautéed the onions until they were sweet, toasted the cornmeal. I added broth. The smell that started to fill the cellar was not complicated. It was warm. It was simple. Corn, squash, broth. I let it simmer, stirring it until it was a thick, creamy congee. I fried shallots until they were crisp. I found a bottle of dark, black bean soy sauce. Then, the egg. I cracked one into a small, hot pan. I cooked it sunny side up, the edges just crisping, but I did not slide it out. I took a small, sharp knife from the block and, right there in the pan, I cut the white of the egg. Too long sides, too short. I cut it into the shape of a kite. I poured the congee into a simple white bowl. I drizzled the dark soy, scattered the shallots, and slid the kite-shaped egg on top. I carried it out myself. The room was holding its breath. I placed the bowl in front of Ivo. He flinched, pulling back. He would not look at it. I did not speak to him. I did not urge him to eat. I stood by the table, picked up one of the ridiculously expensive linen napkins, and began to fold. My fingers moved quickly, a skill I had practiced during 1,000 boring shifts. I made a crease, another, a tuck, a pull. In 10 seconds, I had an origami star. I slid it onto the table, next to his spoon. "You are supposed to make a wish before you eat," I said, my voice low. "Just for him." Ivo looked at the napkin star. His eyes tracked from the star to the bowl. He looked at the kite egg. He looked up at me. I just waited. He picked up the spoon. He dipped the very edge of it into the congee, avoiding the egg. He lifted it, smelled it. He put it in his mouth. He did not react. He just dipped the spoon again. This time, he took a bigger bite. He took the egg. He took the shallots. He ate. He did not stop until the bowl was scraped clean. The silence in the room was now a living thing, heavy and sharp. Ivo put the spoon down and looked at his father. He whispered, just loud enough for the silence to carry it. "It's warm, like home." The entire room froze. Tate looked like he was going to faint. Maraquel actually took a half step back. Ardan Lucero finally moved. His eyes, which had been locked on his son, shifted to me. It was the first time he had truly looked at me. It was not a look of gratitude. It was scrutiny. It was sharp, analytical, and cold. He was not seeing a waitress. He was seeing a variable, an anomaly. He watched my hands as I wiped them on my apron. He watched how I stood, balanced on my feet, ready to move. He was memorizing me. He stood up, the motion fluid, and walked around the table until he was in front of me. He was not much taller than me, but his presence was suffocating. "You will cook for him," he said. It was not a question. "I have a job, sir, at the Blue Comet." "You have a new one." He glanced at Tate. A silent dismissal. Tate practically ran from the room. Lucero turned back to me. 2 weeks. You will prepare his meals. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. I bristled. "I am not moving into your mansion. I am not your personal property." A flicker of something surprise amusement crossed his face. "You will not move in. You will cook from our Ilexport kitchen. My security will arrange transport. They will cover you, morning until night." He said it so calmly. My transport. Cover me. It was an iron box, presented as a favor. 2 weeks, he repeated. My son eats your food. You will be compensated at a rate that will make your diner job irrelevant. I looked at Ivo, who was now carefully unfolding the napkin star. I knew this world. I knew what accepting this meant. You do not just take Ardan Lucero's money. You take the strings that come with it. His security, his kitchen, his son. It felt like protection, and it felt exactly like being targeted. Okay, I said, my voice steady. 2 weeks. The next morning, a black sedan that whispered rather than rumbled was waiting for me at 5:30 a.m. outside my apartment. I had been up for an hour. My blue Comet apron washed and folded in my bag. I was not giving up my real life for this 2-week detour. The car took me to Ilexport. It was not a kitchen, it was a fortress. A clean, temperature-controlled warehouse space that had been converted into a high-end industrial kitchen. It was sterile, silent, and intimidating. Ardan Lucero was there, along with Mara Quell and a man in a suit so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. He introduced himself as Rivon Calder, internal counsel. Miss Reyes, Calder began, his voice like dry ice. He slid a thin sheaf of papers across the steel table, a simple interim agreement. I have conditions, I said, not touching the papers. Ardan, who had been staring out a reinforced window at the foggy harbor, turned his head. His gaze was heavy. I still work my shift at the Blue Comet, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the big room. I will be here every morning at 6 to prepare Ivo's food for the day. You can pick it up, or I can deliver it to him before I go to the diner at 2. Calder looked at Ardan, who gave a nearly invisible nod. That is acceptable, Calder said, looking annoyed at my edit. Provided you are under Vesper escort between all locations, non-negotiable. Fine, I said. What does this say? I nodded at the contract. Standard non-disclosure? You will not speak to the press. You will not confirm or deny your association with Mr. Lucero. You will take absolutely no photographs of Ivo. You will not detail his dietary needs, preferences, or health to any third party. Breach of this results in penalties that I assure you are severe. It was a cage made of paper. Fine, as long as he knows. I pointed my chin at Ardan, that this is for 2 weeks, 14 days. Then I am just the waitress at the Comet again. Understood, Miss Reyes. Ardan said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the space. As I signed, Mara stepped forward. She placed a small, flat black device on the table. It looked like a tiny pager. This is an emergency beacon, she said, her tone flat. You will keep it on your person at all times, in your pocket, clipped to your bra. I do not care. If you are in distress, you press the red button for 3 seconds. It has a priority signal. We will find you. She tapped the case. Your call sign is June Star. I could not help it. A small, dry laugh escaped me. June Star, seriously. What am I, a cartoon superhero? Mara Quell did not blink, but across the room, I saw the corner of Ardan Lucero's mouth twitch. It was not a smile. It was the blueprint of one. A rare, fleeting expression that disappeared as fast as it came. It is merely a designation. Miss Reyes, Mara said. Right, June Star. Got it. I clipped the beacon to the waistband of my jeans, under my shirt. With the business done, the men left. Mara gave me a curt nod. The boy will be here in 1 hour for breakfast. His security detail is outside the door. Do not leave this room. She was gone. The steel door hissed shut, and a heavy lock clicked. I was alone in the most expensive, secure kitchen in New Avalon. I looked at the gleaming equipment. I had 16 burner ranges, immersion circulators, blast chillers, and a pantry that probably had its own zip code. I ignored it all. I found what I needed. White cornmeal, salt, water, cheese. I found a small perfect organic chicken roasting in one of the ovens, clearly prepped by a full-time staff I had not seen. When Ivo arrived, flanked by 2 guards who looked like they were carved from granite, I was ready. The guards stayed by the door. Ivo sat at the steel table, his feet dangling, looking just as small and lost as he did last night. I put a plate in front of him. On it were 3 small, golden brown cakes, arepas, made from the white corn. Perfectly griddled. I had used a small cookie cutter. They were shaped like stars. Next to it was a small bowl of shredded chicken, tossed in a simple sauce of its own roasting juices, lime and cilantro. He looked at the stars. He looked at me. "These are for building," I said. "You split them open, you fill them, like a sandwich, but better." His small hands picked one up. He carefully split the steamy cake, spooned in a tiny amount of chicken, and took a bite. His eyes closed for a second. He ate the whole thing. Then he did the same with the second one. He picked up the third one, split it, and filled it with chicken. Then he held it out to me. My breath caught. It was a test. It was an invitation. It was trust. I knelt so I was at his level and took the star from his hand. "Thank you, Ivo." I took a bite. The corn was sweet, the chicken bright and savory. It was good. The acidity is forward. Ardan Lucero was leaning against the doorframe, watching us. The guards had melted away. He must have been there for minutes. I stood up, still chewing. "Excuse me." He walked closer, picking up a stray piece of the shredded chicken from the bowl with his thumb and forefinger. He tasted it, his expression analytical. The lime, it lands on the palate a fraction of a second before the fat from the chicken. It is assertive. I wiped my hands on my apron. I was a waitress, but I was a cook first. It is a corn-based arepa, which is naturally sweet. The lime juice is an intentional counterpoint. It uses the trigeminal nerve, the same one that registers spice, to wake up the salivary glands before the savory notes hit. It makes you want the next bite more. It is basic flavor science. He stared at me. That slight hint of a smile was back, but this time it was paired with genuine curiosity. He was a food critic, and I had just handed him the textbook. "Phew, basic flavor science," he repeated, savoring the words. "I see." He looked at Ivo, who was now using his finger to get the last bits of chicken. "He likes your science. Miss Reyes." A television mounted in the corner, previously muted, flickered with a local news update. A burned-out truck, smoke still rising. The anchor was talking. Suspected arson at Lucero-owned Pier 4. This is the third such incident this month, all linked to rivals known as the Ashen Court, who seem determined to disrupt Mr. Lucero's port operations. Mara Quell was instantly at Ardan's side, whispering. His face went dark. The analytical food critic was gone, replaced by the syndicate boss. He looked at Ivo, then at me, then at the secure door, a silent calculation. The threat felt distant, just words on a screen, until 3 days later. I had fallen into a rhythm. Morning at Ilex, midday at the Comet. It was jarring, going from a world of silent armored cars to yelling, "Order up for pancakes," but it was my world. That afternoon, I was prepping Ivo's dinner, a thermos of slow-cooked lentil soup he could have before bed. He loved it. I was showing him how to julienne a carrot, my hand over his, when we heard the sound. It was not a gunshot, it was bigger. The sound of a semi-truck engine revving way too high, way too close, followed by the shriek of metal on metal. The building shook. Ivo dropped the knife. Mara, who was always just outside the door, was in the room in a second, her gun drawn. Refrigerated truck, rammed the loading bay door. It is not breached, but they are trying. Ivo was frozen, his eyes wide, staring at the door. I did not think. I grabbed him, pulling him back, away from the door, away from the windows. "Get down, get small." I pushed him behind a massive, wheeled spice rack, a solid wall of steel and sealed plastic drums of cardamom and peppercorns. I shoved myself in front of him, covering his small body with mine. My hand clamped over the back of his head, pushing his face into my apron. "It is okay," I whispered, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break my ribs. "It is just noise, just a big, stupid noise." My hands were shaking, but I did not let go. We heard shouting outside. Mara was yelling codes into her radio, then silence. thicker than before. A minute later, the door opened. It was Ardan. He took in the scene in one sweep: Mara at the door, her gun holstered but her hand on it, the kitchen in perfect order, and me tangled with his son behind a spice rack. He saw my shaking hands still clamped on Ivo's head. He saw me shielding his son. His face was unreadable, a mask of cold control. "It is clear," he said. I let go of Ivo, my knees weak. "You okay, kid?" Ivo nodded, his face pale. He did not let go of my shirt. Ardan looked at Mara. Status. Ashen court probe. They were testing response time. They did not get through. Vesper unit engaged them at the outer gate. They fled. "My son was inside," Ardan said, his voice dangerously quiet. "The kitchen was never compromised, sir. It is the safest room in the building," Mara said. Ardan's eyes met mine over Ivo's head. He said nothing. That evening, the usual black sedan was not waiting for me. Ardan Lucero was leaning against his own car, a dark Bentley that looked like it could drive through a brick wall. "I will take you home," he said. We drove through New Avalon in silence. He did not take the highway. He took the back streets, the way I always walked. He knew the route. When we pulled up to my building in Dockside Row, the fading light made the cracked stucco and rusty fire escapes look even sadder. I got out. "Thank you for the ride." He got out too, walking me to the peeling front door. I fumbled for my keys, finally jamming the old brass one into the lock. It stuck, like it always did. I had to jiggle it, pulling it out a quarter inch, then turning. Ardan watched my ritual, his eyes fixed on the cheap, failing hardware, his brow furrowed in a deep frown. It was the frown of a man who saw a problem that should not exist, a flaw in the system. "Good night, Miss Reyes," he said, his eyes still on the lock. "Good night, Mr. Lucero." He waited until I was inside and had thrown the deadbolt before he got back in his car. I was rattled, the truck, the fear, the realization of what world I had stepped into, but I still had a job. I went to my tiny kitchen and pulled out oats, cinnamon, and honey. I was testing a new recipe for Ivo's bedtime snack, something to help him sleep after the scare. I made a thick, creamy oatmeal milk, sweetened it, and poured it into a new, high-end thermos I had bought. I would give it to the driver in the morning. I was washing up when my phone buzzed, a new number, a text message. It was from Ivo. I did not know how he got my number, but I knew who must have given it to him. The text just said, "Slept better." I smiled, feeling the tension of the day ease. I typed, "Good, see you in the morning." A second later, another text came in, from Ardan's number. It was not words. It was a single solitary, yellow star emoji. It was the first time I realized he might speak the same language I did. The kitchen at Ilexport had become a strange bubble of safety. In here, the world was just steel, heat, and the scent of whatever I was making. The rhythm of it was steady. I would arrive at 6 a.m., the sky over the bay just turning from bruised purple to gray. I would prep Ivo's breakfast and lunch and plan his dinner. On the fourth day, I was prepping a simple chicken stir-fry. I had the ingredients lined up. I pulled a heavy German steel chef's knife from the magnetic block. The moment I set it on the thick wooden cutting board, the thwack of the steel hitting the wood echoed. Ivo, who had been sitting at the table sketching stars on a napkin, flinched so hard he knocked his chair back. His breath hitched. He did not cry. He just went utterly pale, his eyes fixed on the knife. I froze. The sound, it was the sound. My mind flashed back 3 years, to the St. Halcyon ward, the benefit I had volunteered for, cooking for the children in the psych wing. Dr. Anya Sharma, the head therapist, had pulled me aside. "Remember, June," she had said, her voice quiet. "For these children, trauma is sensory. It is not just a memory. It is a sound, a smell, a texture. A sudden loud noise can be a gunshot. A metallic sound can be the tool that hurt them." She had taught me the safe eating rituals. No sudden noises. Announce every action. Use quiet tools. Let the child control the pace. I looked at Ivo, who who was now pressing his hands over his ears. Ardan was watching from the glass-walled office that overlooked the kitchen. He had started to move, to stand up, but I held up one hand, palm out. Wait. He stopped. I slowly, deliberately, put the steel knife back on the magnetic strip. I walked to the sink, washed my hands, and dried them. "Ivo," I said softly. He did not look at me. "That was a loud noise. I'm sorry. I'm putting the metal knife away." I went to a drawer and pulled out a black ceramic knife. It was lighter, quieter. "I am going to use a new knife," and I said, showing him. "This one is made of ceramic. It is very quiet. See?" I tapped it lightly on the board. It made a dull thunk, like wood on wood. He slowly lowered his hands. "And," I said, "it is too quiet in here anyway." I went to my phone, which I kept on a charging dock by the spice rack. I pulled up a playlist I had made. It was just the sound of waves, recorded from the new Avalon Pier, the gentle shush of water on sand, the distant call of a gull. I set the volume low, just enough to fill the sterile silence. Then I went back to work. I cut the chicken. I sliced the peppers. The ceramic knife whispered through the vegetables. Within 5 minutes, Ivo had pulled his chair back to the table. Within 10, he was sketching again. I glanced at the office. Ardan was sitting back down, his gaze fixed on me. He was not just watching, he was studying. He was seeing a method he did not understand, a language of safety built from spice and sound. He did not interfere. That afternoon, I decided to push it. Ivo needed to see where food came from, to see it as a choice, not just something that appeared in front of him. "We are going on a field trip," I announced. Ivo looked up. "To the diner." "Better. We are going to the Loden Sea Market. We need clams." It took a call to Mara, which led to a call to Ardan. I could hear the muffled, tense conversation. Public space, high risk, Ashen Court activity. I did not care. "He needs this," I told Mara. "He cannot live in a steel box. You want him to eat. He needs to see the world is not just a threat." There was a long silence. Then, "Mr. Lucero approves. 1 hour, Vesper unit will be in place." The market was chaos, in the best way. It smelled of salt, fish, old wood, and diesel. Fishermen were shouting, vendors were haggling, the air was wet and loud. Ivo clutched my hand, his small body tense. Ardan was there, and he was not with us, and he was about 30 feet back, wearing a simple dark jacket, looking for all the world like another shopper. If shoppers had the coiled energy of a panther. 2 men I recognized as his Vesper guards, dressed in dockworker clothes, fanned out, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. I led Ivo to Old Man Hemlock's stand. "These are the best," I told him, pointing at the small, dark-shelled clams. "You want the thin shells, they are sweeter." Hemlock, his face a roadmap of sun and sea, grinned. "She's right, kid. How many—" "Ivo," I said, pressing a $20 bill into his hand. "You ask him. Tell him we need enough for soup for 3 people, and ask him for his best price." Ivo looked at the money, then at Hemlock, then at me. "Go on," I encouraged. "Your voice is strong. Use it." He stepped forward. "Sir, I need clams for 3, for soup. What is your best price?" Hemlock's grin softened. "For you, Captain, I will give you the gold standard price." Ivo paid him, and the fisherman loaded a bag, handing it to Ivo. The boy held it. He had chosen. He had paid. It was his. As we turned to leave, I felt it, the prickle on my neck, the same feeling I got at the diner when a customer was about to skip on a check, but 1,000 times colder. I scanned the crowd, a man in a gray hoodie, standing too still, another man by the ice truck, not buying, just watching. They were not looking at me. They were looking at Ivo. Ashen Court. My heart went cold. I did not run. I did not grab Ivo. I just put my hand on his shoulder. "You know what I have never done, ridden the harbor cable car." I steered him gently toward the tourist platform at the end of the pier. "Come on, we can see the whole bay." I looked back. Ardan was gone, But as we stepped onto the platform and into the red metal cabin, the door of the cabin directly behind ours slid shut. I caught a glimpse of Ardan's profile, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the two men in the crowd who were now moving, too late, toward the platform. The car lurched and lifted, carrying us up over the water. Ivo pressed his face to the glass, mesmerized by the view. I looked at the car behind us. Ardan was standing, his back to the window, but I knew he was not looking at the view. He was a shield, a promise, riding in our wake. When we got back to Ilex, the kitchen felt like a sanctuary. "Okay, Captain," I said, handing Ivo an apron. "You bought the clams. You get to help cook them." I showed him how to scrub the shells. While he worked, I sautéed garlic, shallots, and a pinch of fresh turmeric in a deep pot, filling the room with a warm, earthy smell. I added almond milk instead of heavy cream, a splash of white wine, and then the clams. We made garlic bread, but I mixed the softened butter with chopped fresh sage before spreading it. We sat at the steel table, the 3 bowls steaming. Ivo took a bite. The soup was delicate, the almond milk giving it a subtle sweetness that played with the bright turmeric and the salty clam broth. Ivo ate the entire bowl. Then he ate a second. He did not just eat. He beamed. It was the first real, unguarded smile I had seen from him. Ardan was watching from his usual spot by the door, leaning against the frame. He had not said a word since we got back. He pushed off the wall and walked to the table. He looked at the empty bowl, then at his son's smiling face. He looked at me. "Thank you," he said. The 2 words were quiet, but they landed with the weight of a paragraph. For him, it was a speech. "He did most of the work," I said, ruffling Ivo's hair. "Tomorrow, I will let him decorate his own bowl, toppings. He gets to be in charge." Ardan nodded, a small, private acknowledgement. Later, after Ivo had been picked up, I was cleaning my station. The kitchen was dark, except for the single light over the sink. I washed my apron, wrung it out, and turned to hang it on the hook by the door. Ardan was still there. I had not heard him. "Let me," he said. He took the damp apron from my hands. Our fingers brushed, but it was when he turned to the hook that it happened. He reached up, and the back of his hand, his knuckles, grazed the sensitive skin on the nape of my neck, just below my hairline. It was nothing, a feather-light, accidental touch, but a jolt, sharp and hot, shot straight down my spine. I inhaled sharply. He froze. His hand was still there, his fingers just millimeters from my skin. I could feel the heat radiating from him. I stepped back, breaking the contact. The air between us was suddenly thick and electric. I had rules. This job was for the kid. This man, his world, was a complication I could not afford. "I should go," I said, my voice too breathy. I cleared my throat. "Boundaries, Mr. Lucero. They are important." He lowered his hand, his eyes dark, unblinking. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I am not in a hurry. Juniper." The use of my first name, the quiet patience in his voice, was somehow more unsettling than if he had grabbed me. I left quickly, the Vesper driver taking me home through the darkening streets. I walked up the 3 flights to my apartment, my neck still tingling, my mind replaying the moment. I got to my door, my old, unreliable key in my hand, and stopped. The lock was gone. In its place was a sleek, black metal smart lock, the kind with a keypad and a biometric scanner. It was heavy-duty, expensive, and completely, silently installed. There was no note. There did not need to be. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the door. The man had replaced the lock on my apartment. He had seen a flaw in his system, a point of vulnerability, and he had fixed it. I felt safe, and I felt owned. I was not sure which feeling scared me more. My phone vibrated in my apron pocket just after the lunch rush, around 2 p.m. I was at the Blue Comet, wiping down the counter, the smell of fries and old coffee thick in the air. I pulled it out. It was not the secure burner Mara had given me. It was my personal phone, a restricted number. I opened the text. Stop feeding the brat if you want your roach motel to stay standing. My stomach hollowed out. Below the text, an image loaded. It was the side wall of the Comet, the familiar peeling blue paint, but now a jagged black sigil was spray-painted across it, ugly and threatening, the mark of the Ashen Court. My hands started to shake. This was not the Ilex port. This was not Ardan Lucero's world. This was mine. This was Tate's. This was the place I came back to every day to feel normal. I forced myself to breathe. Ivo was waiting for me at the Ilex kitchen. I could not let him see me like this. I shoved my phone back into my pocket, grabbed my bag, and walked out the back door. I used the comms channel on the June Star beacon. "Mara," I said, my voice tight. "We have a problem. Code Ashen Court. They hit the diner, paint. No one is hurt, but they were there." The reply was instant, her voice clipped and cold. "Understood. Proceed to Ilex as scheduled. Do not return to the diner. Vesper unit is mobile. We are handling it." When I arrived at the Ilex port, the atmosphere was Arctic. The normal hum of the high-end ventilation was the only sound. Ivo was in the glass-walled office that overlooked the kitchen, his headphones on, watching something on a tablet. He was safe. Ardan was not in the office. He was standing by the massive steel loading bay doors, his back to me, talking to Mara. "Oh, confirm the sigil," Mara was saying in a low, rapid voice. "Local surveillance is being scrubbed by our team. Vesper is locking down the 3 blocks around the diner, silently." Ardan was perfectly still. He was not shouting. He was not pacing. He was coiled, a compressed, silent rage that was far more terrifying than any explosion. I watched the muscles in his shoulders tighten under his suit jacket. He must have felt me watching, because he turned. His face was marble, cold and hard. He looked at me, and his eyes were flat, dark, and dangerous. Then he glanced toward the office, at his son, and the rage was instantly contained. He locked it down, his expression smoothing just enough to look controlled. He walked toward me. "My car," he said, his voice low and guttate. 10 minutes, Pier 7. "Sir," Mara interjected, "a static meeting in an open-air location is not secure. Not after this." "Pier 7, he repeated. It was not a suggestion. He walked past me, close enough that I could feel the cold fury rolling off him, and went into the office. I heard his voice shift instantly, the steel softening. "Ivo, I have to make a call. I need you to stay with Juniper. Show her the drawing you made of the harbor." Pier 7 was the oldest, most derelict pier in New Avalon. It was little more than rotting pilings and cracked concrete, stretching out into the gray, choppy water. The wind was relentless. It tore at my jacket and whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes with salt. The air smelled of low tide, creosote, and decay. Ardan was already there, standing at the far end, staring out at the whitecaps. I did not see his guards, but I knew they were there, in the shadows of the old cranes on the roofs of the warehouses. I walked until I was standing beside him, my hands shoved deep in my pockets. The wind howled around us. "They tagged my diner," I said, shouting slightly to be heard over the wind. "I am aware," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It is being handled. The paint will be gone before the dinner shift." "Whoa, that is not handling it," I snapped, when the fear finally giving way to anger. "That is just janitorial work. They know where I work. Ardan, they know who I am. They came to my place. This is because of you." He finally turned to face me. His eyes were the color of the storm water. "Yes." The simple, blunt admission struck me silent for a second. "This is the line," I said, my voice shaking. "This is your world bleeding into mine. I will not be the leverage they use against you. I am not a pawn. I will not be a weak point in your strategy." He stepped closer, the wind tearing at his unbuttoned jacket. "No," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You are not." "I am just the cook," I insisted, taking a step back. "This is a 2-week contract. I cannot be your liability." "You are not the liability," he said, closing the distance between us again. He was close now, forcing me to look up at him. "You are the fulcrum. The what? The fulcrum, he repeated, his voice intense. The pivot point, the anchor. They think you are my weakness. That is why they are desperate. They are attacking you because they are failing to attack me. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell him that anchors are just as trapped as liabilities, when a sound split the air. It was not a bang. It was a heavy, flat crack, instantly followed by the high-pitched zing of a ricochet. Concrete dust exploded from a piling not 5 feet from my head. Sniper. My body froze, but Ardan's did not. In the same instant, Mara Quell seemed to materialize from behind a stack of old lobster traps, her gun in her hand. Boss June move now? Ardan did not ask questions. He grabbed my arm in a steel grip and pulled me into a dead run. Container, get in the container. Mara was already there, yanking on the heavy bar of a dark red shipping container that sat isolated on the pier. Inside go-go. Another crack. This one felt closer. The bullet screamed past my ear. Ardan shoved me, hard. I stumbled forward, falling into pitch blackness. The smell hit me before anything else. Cinnamon overpowering, warm, spicy dust that filled my nose and lungs. He fell in right behind me. Grabbing the heavy door and pulling it shut, the metal groaned, and we were plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. The sudden silence was terrifying. The roar of the wind was gone, replaced by the sound of our own breathing. We were both panting, adrenaline dumping into our veins. I was pressed against the corrugated steel wall. Ardan was not touching me, but he was shielding me. His body a solid barrier between me and the door. I could feel the heat coming off him. I put a hand out to steady myself, and my palm landed flat on his chest. I felt his heart hammering, a frantic, powerful rhythm that matched my own. "Are you hit?" I whispered. "No." His voice was a low rasp, very close to my ear. "You—" "No." We stood there in the dark, breathing in cinnamon, listening. He did not move. He was a statue of protection. The proximity was overwhelming, more intimate than the touch at the kitchen door. I could smell the wool of his suit, the salt from the pier, and the spice that surrounded us. This close. He was not the syndicate boss. He was just a man, breathing hard in the dark. A sudden, cold fear shot through me. "Don't let Evo see blood," I whispered, the thought more terrifying than the bullet. "Whatever happens, do not let him see you bleed. Promise me." I felt his chest rise in a long, slow breath under my palm. "I will not," he promised. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. The professional boundary, the careful line I'd been trying to walk, had been obliterated by 2 bullets. It was gone. He shifted, just a fraction, turning his head toward me in the absolute black. "Juniper," he said. "Yes." There was a pause. Ardan Lucero, hesitating. "May I hold your hand?" The question was so formal, so strangely gentle. It threw me completely. After the violence, the running, the terror, he was asking. He was not taking. He was asking for the smallest, simplest connection. My throat was too tight to speak. I just shifted my hand from his chest, found his, and laced my fingers through his. His grip was strong, solid, and incredibly warm. It was not a gesture of romance. It was an anchor. 2 people holding on in the dark. Nothing more, and everything more. We stood like that for what felt like an eternal, spice-scented minute. A sharp, metallic rap on the door made us both jump. "Clear," Mara's voice called, muffled. "Shooter is gone. Vesper has the rifle. We are clear." Ardan's hand squeezed mine once, tight. Then he let go. The loss of contact was a sudden chill. He pushed the heavy door open. The gray afternoon light was blinding. We stumbled out, blinking, back into the howling wind. The pier was empty, the threat gone. We looked at each other. The air crackled. We were allies again, just 2 people responsible for a child. But something fundamental had been redrawn. That night, the rain came. It was not a drizzle, it was a deluge, a roar of water that hammered New Avalon. My shift at the Comet had been canceled. Tate had called, rattled about the Vesper team cleaning the wall and upgrading his security cameras, all on the Lucero account. I should have been home, behind my new smart lock. Instead, I was at the Ilex kitchen. He was there too. He had sent Evo home with Mara and a full security detail. We were alone. The rain pounded on the tin roof, a deafening drumbeat that isolated us from the entire world. "He needs his dinner menu for tomorrow," I said. It was a flimsy excuse. "I know," Ardon replied. We did not talk about the sniper. We did not talk about the container. Instead, we cooked. It was a mutual, unspoken need. We needed the rhythm, the work. I found semolina flour and eggs. He found a small jar of green peppercorns and brine. "Pasta," I said. "I will make the sauce," he said. I made fresh egg pasta, rolling the dough thin, feeding it through the gleaming steel cutter. At the stove, he moved with an unexpected grace, crushing the peppercorns, sautéing shallots in butter, adding cream. A small radio on the shelf was playing a slow, instrumental jazz tune, barely audible beneath the roar of the rain. We moved around each other in the kitchen, a silent, practiced dance. Pass the bowl, strain the pasta. We did not need to speak. We ate standing at the main steel prep table, the simple, peppery pasta rich and warm. The rain was a solid wall of sound, locking us in. I put my empty bowl in the sink. He put his next to mine. The jazz tune ended, replaced by another, even slower. He turned to me. "Thank you, Juniper, for today, for not running." "I do not run," I said, my voice quiet. He looked at me, his eyes tracing the lines of my face as if he was memorizing them. He saw the exhaustion I felt, the stubbornness, the lingering fear. He raised his hand, very slowly, giving me time to move. He did not touch my face. He rested his palm gently on the side of my neck, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, just as he had in the container. Then he leaned in. He did not kiss my mouth. He pressed his lips to my forehead. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of gratitude, of respect. It was warm, measured, and shockingly tender. It lasted 3 full seconds, a lifetime. He pulled back, his hand dropping from my jaw. He held my gaze, his own dark and complicated. He had respected the boundary, but he had shown me exactly where it was. The kiss on the forehead, chaste as it was, had changed the air pressure in our world. The 2 weeks were nearly up, but the end date felt less like an exit and more like a line drawn in shifting sand. Evo had changed. He was less pale. His shoulders were not as hunched, but the progress was not linear. One morning, I arrived at Elex to find him sitting at the steel table, not drawing, just staring at the wall. He was vibrating with a low, thrumming anxiety. "Hey, Captain," I said softly, setting my bag down. "You are quiet today." He did not look at me. I had a bad dream. I pulled up a stool and sat opposite him. I did not crowd him. "The kitchen is safe. You want to tell me about it?" He whispered, "I was at a party. At school. Everyone was laughing. They kept making me eat. It was purple, and it was cold. I told them no, but they held my hands, and they laughed." My chest tightened. It was the root trauma, bubbling up, the violence at his school, the incident that started this all. It was never just about the food. It was about the laughter, the humiliation, the absolute loss of control. I remembered Dr. Sharma's words from St. Halcyon's trauma takes away their power. The healing is not in the food, June. It is in the choice. "Okay," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I understand that sounds terrifying, and you know what, you are right. No one should ever make you eat anything." I stood up and went to the dry pantry. I pulled out a sack of rice, a bag of carrots, nori sheets. I went to the fridge and got chicken, avocados. "Today," I announced, "is a new holiday. It is Evo Makes the Rules Day, and I am just the prep cook. You are the head chef." For the next hour, I did not make a meal. I made components. I cooked a perfect, simple pot of rice congee, leaving it warm and neutral. I poached the chicken and shredded it. I used my smallest cutter to punch tiny stars out of the carrots. I mashed an avocado with a tiny bit of lime and salt. I toasted the seaweed sheets and crumbled them into a dark, salty powder. I did not put them on a plate. I put each component into its own small white bowl. I arranged the bowls in a circle on the steel table, with the large, steaming pot of congee in the middle. I placed an empty bowl and a soup spoon in front of Evo. "This," I said, "is a topping bar. You are the boss. You decide what goes in or what stays out. You can have just rice. You can have only chicken. You can mix everything. You can have nothing. The choice is 100% yours." He looked at the array, his eyes wide. He was afraid to trust it. "Go on, chef," I prompted gently. "Build your perfect bowl." He hesitated. Then, slowly, his small hand reached out. He picked up the large spoon and put a small scoop of congee into his bowl. He looked at me. I was busy wiping the counter, not watching him. I heard the small click of a ceramic spoon on a ceramic bowl. He had added something. I glanced. The shredded chicken. He took a bite. He took another. He put the bowl down. He looked at the circle of toppings. Then he picked his bowl back up and went back to the bar. He added the avocado. He added the carrot stars. He added a tiny sprinkle of the seaweed. He sat back down and began to eat, his movements no longer hesitant but decisive. He ate the entire bowl. I felt Ardon's presence before I saw him. He was standing in the doorway of the glass office, just watching. His face was a mask, as usual, but he was utterly still. He was watching his son, who was now holding his bowl with both hands, scraping the bottom clean. Ivo put the bowl down, his hand steady. He had taken control. He had faced the ghost of the party, and he had won. Ardon's eyes met mine across the room. He did not smile. He did not nod. He just watched his son. And for a fraction of a second, the mask of the syndicate boss slipped. I saw the father, stunned and silent, witnessing a small, quiet miracle. The victory felt good, but my world was still split. That afternoon, I headed to the Blue Comet. My new lock clicked open with a satisfying thunk. The Vesper driver, a silent man named Elias, dropped me at the corner. The second I walked into the diner, I knew something was wrong. Tate was white as a sheet, chain-smoking by the register, which he never did. The diner was empty, a closed-for-maintenance sign hanging crooked in the window. "Tate, what is going on?" Elias said the paint was gone. "The paint is gone. June," Tate said, his voice trembling. "It has been replaced. By them." He pointed to a man in a rumpled gray suit who was taping a large, official-looking notice to our front door. The notice was bright, an ugly shade of orange. "Who is that?" "The Bureau of Commercial Conduct and Veracity," Tate whispered, crushing out his cigarette. "The BCCV. I have never even heard of them. They showed up an hour ago. Anonymous tip. They are pulling our licenses. June, all of them, health, liquor, operating. They say our fire suppression is out of code. They say our payroll taxes are filed incorrectly. It is a mountain of violations. We are done." This was not paint. This was an execution. This was the Ashen Court's countermove, smarter and more lethal than a bullet. They were not just scaring me. They were bankrupting the people I worked for. I was helping Tate spread the mountain of paperwork on the counter when the bell on the door chimed. Ardan Lucero walked into the Blue Comet diner. He did not look like he belonged. He was a cut crystal glass in a room full of greasy spoons. The man from the BCCV looked up, annoyed, and then his annoyance froze, recognition dawning. Ardan ignored him. He walked to the counter, his gaze taking in the piles of paper, Tate's panicked face, and the orange sticker on his door. "An administrative annoyance," he said, his voice quiet. "It is ruin, Mr. Lucero," Tate stammered. "We cannot fight this. We do not have the lawyers." "I do," Ardon said simply. He looked at the BCCV inspector, who was now sweating. My internal counsel, Ravon Calder finds these bureaucratic weaponizations distasteful. He has extensive experience with the BCCV. He would be happy to consult, free of charge. Tate looked like he was going to cry. Sir, I cannot ask. You are not asking. I am offering. Ardon looked at me. There is, however, a small price, not of money. I narrowed my eyes. What? This kitchen, and he said, gesturing to the diner. It is a good space, certified. When Mr. Calder has this nonsense cleared up, I would like to propose a new use for it. After hours. I understand you have a passion for teaching children how to cook. I stared at him. It was brilliant. It was a power play wrapped in a community service ribbon. He was cleaning up the mess his rivals had made, but in doing so, he was anchoring himself to my world. He was legitimizing his presence, using my own passions as the foundation. I will have Mr. Calder call you, he said to Tate. He nodded at me. A silent, we will discuss this later, and walked out. The BCCV inspector scrambled to pull the orange sticker off the door, his hands fumbling. Later that night at Ilex, I confronted him. Ivo was in the office, happily drawing. That was a move. Ardin showing up at my diner, offering Ravon Calder. The situation was rectified, he said, pouring himself a small cup of black coffee. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. But I need to be clear. Do not try to buy me. Do not think that because you solved a problem you brought into my life, that I somehow belong to you. He stopped, the cup halfway to his lips. He looked at me over the rim, and that rare, almost smile touched his mouth. It was sharp and amused. Miss Reyes, he said, I am not buying you. I am scoring points. There is a very distinct difference. I did not have a reply to that. The next day, Ivo gave me a gift. It was a simple, spiral-bound notebook. On the cover, he had glued dozens of little gold and silver foil stars in his 9-year-old scrawl. He had written June's food that is safe. I opened it. The first page was a crayon drawing of a bowl of yellow congee with a kite-shaped egg. The next page was 3 star-shaped arepas. The third was a bowl of clam soup with a smiling stick figure next to it. It was his language. It was our language. This notebook, this collection of simple recipes, was the most intimate thing I had ever been given. I was still holding it when Mara Quell entered the kitchen. She never entered the kitchen unless it was serious. June, Mr. Lucero, we have a problem. Ardin was at her side in an instant. Report! The Bay Lights Festival, Mara said, her voice clipped. It is in 3 days. As you know, Lucero Industries is the primary sponsor of the food court. Intel from Vesper is solid. The Ashen Court is planning a move. What kind of move? Ardin asked, his voice flat. They are not trying to hit you. They are trying to hit the public. Mass panic. They want to make you look weak. To prove you cannot even secure a family event, they are going to make a scene at the food court. I looked down at the notebook in my hands. I thought of Ivo's nightmare. A crowd. Laughter. Fear. I am registering a stall, I said. They both turned to look at me. Juniper, no, Ardon said, his voice absolute. It is the center of the target. Which is why we have to be there, I insisted, my voice gaining strength. Their weapon is fear. The only antidote to fear is joy. The only way to beat a nightmare is to walk into it while you are awake. Ivo needs to see a crowd of people eating and being happy. We will give them the one thing the Ashen Court cannot fight comfort. We will open a stall. We will call it the Warm Star Kitchen. Ardon stared at me, his mind clearly racing, seeing the strategy, the psychological counterplay. He saw the risk, but he also saw the brilliance. He nodded once. You will do it, but on one condition. Anything, I said. The local police will handle the perimeter, but the food court, the security will be mine. Vesper will be in every shadow. My men, my rules. No one gets near you or my son unless I say so. The festival was in 2 days. The tension in New Avalon was a low. humming wire stretched tight over the bay. We were all vibrating with it. The warm star kitchen was no longer just an idea. It was a physical stall, Vesper-built, sitting near the West Plaza exit, waiting. I needed space. The sterile, secure Ilex kitchen, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now felt small, like a cage. I took the steel service stairs to the one place I was usually alone, the roof of the warehouse. It was dusk. The sky was a spectacular, bleeding bruise of orange, purple, and indigo. The wind was high, whipping off the bay, smelling of salt and distant rain. I had brought up a portable butane burner. I was testing a final element for the stall, a bitter orange caramel sauce, something to drizzle over a simple, warm rice pudding. I stirred the sugar and water in a small, heavy pot. My eyes focused on the color. It had to be perfect amber, just smoking, before I added the cream. The sharp smell of burning sugar and bright, acidic citrus cut through the salt air. I did not hear him arrive. He moved too quietly for that, but I felt the shift in the air, the way the atmosphere changes when a heavy object enters its orbit. "That smells dangerous," Ardon said. I glanced over, and he was standing about 10 feet away, hands pushed deep into the pockets of his dark trousers. No jacket, just a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing the corded muscle there. "Caramel is always dangerous," I said, my gaze dropping back to the pot. "You look away for 1 second, it burns. It goes from perfect to poison." He walked closer, standing beside me. He was not looking at the pot. He was watching my hands, the steady, circular motion of the whisk. We stood in silence for a long time, just the hiss of the burner and the low moan of the wind over the roof's edge. "You grew up poor," he stated. It was not a question. I did not stop stirring. The sugar was almost ready, the color deepening to a rich copper. "What makes you say that?" "The way you watch the sugar," he said, his voice quiet, almost lost in the wind. "You are not willing to waste it. You respect the ingredients. People who grow up with plenty, they are careless. They throw it out and start again." The sugar began to smoke. I pulled it from the heat and poured in the cream. It spat and hissed, a violent, roiling reaction, before I whisked it into a smooth, bubbling, pale brown sauce. My mom and I lived in a one-room flat in Dockside Row, the one you saw. We ate rice and beans 5 nights a week. Sugar was a luxury. Wasting it was a sin. "The docks," he said, his eyes going distant, looking out at the glittering, far-off lights of the city. "I spent my childhood on Pier 9, not visiting, living. My old man was a longshoreman until he organized them. I learned to count by checking manifests. I learned to fight on the container cranes. Our pasts, his, a hardscrabble climb to power, mine, a hardscrabble fight for survival. 2 different worlds, but both forged in the same grit and salt air of New Avalon. We were not so different. The tension of the festival, the threat of the Ashen Court, the shared history, it all hung in the air between us. The old portable radio I had brought up for the wave sounds was still playing, forgotten in the corner, as if on cue. The track changed. It was an old vinyl recording, slow and smoky, a saxophone crying over a simple, walking bass line. I had finished the caramel. I turned off the burner. The silence that rushed in was filled only by the music and the wind. Ardon looked at me. The last light of the sunset caught the silver at his temples. He held out his hand. It was not a grab, not even a touch. It was an open, formal invitation. "Juniper," he said, "may I have a slow dance?" My heart did a stupid, clumsy jump. This was the man who had asked to hold my hand in a dark container. This was the man who had kissed my forehead in a rainstorm. This was not a boss. This was Ardon. I wiped my sticky hands on my apron. "Okay, 1 dance." I did not take his offered hand. I stepped forward and, maintaining that careful, unspoken boundary, I put my hands on his shoulders. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his mouth. He did not pull me closer. He did not wrap his arms around my body. He placed his hands lightly, formally on my waist. We moved, a slow, shuffling circle on the gravel roof. We were 2 feet apart, connected only by our hands. It was the most chaste, yet electrically charged. Moment of my life. We just swayed, moving to the sad, slow music. 2 islands in the middle of a windy sky. The wind picked up, growing colder. It whipped a strand of my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. The lights of New Avalon glittered below us, a carpet of scattered stars. He stopped moving. He took his hands from my waist and shrugged off his suit jacket, which I had not even realized he had carried up and slung over a ventilation pipe. Before I could protest, he draped it over my shoulders. It was heavy, the wool exquisitely tailored and overwhelmingly warm. It smelled like him clean soap, expensive wool, and that faint, metallic hint of power. "You are cold," he said. It was a simple observation, a gesture of pure care. The music was still playing. The jacket was a warm, intimate weight. The boundary had just been blurred again. "Ardan," I started, but I did not know what I was going to say. "This is not part of the deal. This is complicated." "I know," he said, as if he had heard my thoughts. He stepped back into our dancing space. He did not put his hands on my waist. He lifted one hand, the movement slow, and touched my face. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. It was not an accident, it was deliberate. "This is not," he whispered, his voice rough, "part of the contract." "I know," I whispered back. He leaned in, slowly, giving me every chance to turn away, to pull back, to stop him. I did not move. I watched his eyes, dark and intense, until my own fluttered shut. His lips met mine. It was not the desperate kiss of a movie. It was not the chaste kiss on the forehead. It was a question and an answer. It was slow, tentative at first, exploring, then gaining confidence. It was warm. It tasted of the bitter orange caramel that was still on my lips and the salt air that surrounded us. It was voluntary. It was mutual. I felt his other hand come up, cradling my jaw, holding me steady. My own hands, still on his shoulders, clenched the fabric of his shirt. It was just enough. It was perfect. And just as the heat of it began to build, just as my breath started to quicken and the kiss threatened to deepen into something we could not take back, he pulled away. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. We were both breathing a little too fast. He opened his eyes. He looked at me, and he smiled, a real, small, genuine smile that lit his face. "The limit," he murmured. I smiled back, my heart thumping against my ribs. The limit. We knew we could not cross it. Not now. Not with the world we lived in, with his son downstairs and an army of rivals at the gates. The moment was shattered by the sharp, electronic bzzzt of his phone, a priority text. We sprang apart. It was like dousing a flame with ice water. He pulled the phone from his pocket, his face instantly hardening. The smile gone. The father, the dancer, was gone. The boss was back. He read the text. His whole body went rigid. "Ardan, what is it?" He showed me the screen. It was from Mara. "Bait is in. Vesper confirms Ashen Court operative planted a device inside the central generator for the food court. Timed, not explosive. Looks like a high-capacity EMP or signal jammer, designed for maximum panic. I am pulling it," he said, his voice flat and cold. He was already dialing Mara. "The stall is canceled. The festival is off. I am pulling the sponsorship." "No." The word was out of my mouth before I could stop it. He stopped dialing and turned to me, his eyes flashing with a cold fire. "This is not a negotiation. Juniper, this is a direct threat. They are targeting the infrastructure. I will not put my son in the middle of a stampede. And I will not let them win," I argued, grabbing his arm, his jacket still heavy on my shoulders. "Do you not see? This is the exact reason we have to go. This is his nightmare. A public space, food and panic. If we run now, we prove them right. We teach Evo that the fear is justified. We teach him that he is the target, and he must spend his life hiding." I stepped closer, my voice fierce. He needs to learn that a happy meal, in a crowd, in the sunshine, is his right. It is his right to be a normal kid. We cannot let them take that from him. We do not run. He stared at me, his jaw working. He was caught between the syndicate boss, whose job was to eliminate risk, and the father, who desperately wanted what I was describing. It is too dangerous, he ground out. So we make it safe, I countered. We do not run, we adapt. He did not agree for a full minute. He just looked at me, then at the city, then back at me. Finally, he gave a short, sharp nod. A compromise, he said. Vesper sweeps the generator. We cannot move it, but we can contain it. Mara will move your stall, not central. You are already by the west exit, near the pier. It is a choke point, easier to defend. Done, and I said, we are also swapping your schedule. The program says you open at noon. You will open at 11:30 a.m., before the main crowd hits. Get in, get out. Also done. And my Vesper team, he added, will be running smoke exits. If that device goes off, they will deploy non-toxic visual cover to prevent a stampede and create safe evacuation lanes. My men will be dressed as festival staff. Good, that is a plan, I said, relieved. The last 2 days were a blur of logistics. The tension was back, tighter than ever, but now it was focused. It was shared. The night before the festival, I was at the Ilex kitchen with Evo. My 2-week contract had long since evaporated. I was just there. Evo was not scared. He was excited. He was practicing. I had bought a stack of bright yellow paper napkins. The food is the first welcome, I told him, but the presentation is the second. I showed him how I folded the napkin at the Comet, a simple move, a tuck, a star. He copied me. His small fingers were surprisingly deft. Now this, I said, folding another one, a kite. A boat, he said, folding one his own way, with a tall sail. He looked at the 3 shapes on the table. My star, my kite, and his boat. He looked up at me, his eyes bright. I can give these to the children who come. He was not afraid of the crowd. He was ready to host it. Ardan walked in, his suit jacket on, the boss in full effect. He stopped, watching his son proudly line up a small fleet of paper boats. Evo, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Evo looked up. Yes, Papa. Tomorrow will be loud, Ardan said, kneeling. And when we are in a crowd, we have a new family rule, a 3-step plan. What do we do? Step 1, Evo recited, his voice serious. I hold your hand or June's hand. I do not let go. Step 2, Ardan said. If there is a loud noise, I do not run. I find your coat or June's apron, and I hold on tight. I become a rock. Step 3, Ardan finished. I listen to your voice, or Mara's voice, no one else's, and I go where you say, fast. It was a safety ritual, a new one, born of his world, but incorporating mine. Ardan kissed the top of his son's head. Good, you're ready, Captain. He stood and looked at me over his son's head. His eyes were heavy with the weight of the coming day, but they were also full of a new, fierce trust. We were a team, and we were walking into the storm together. The Baylights Festival exploded into life. It was New Avalon at its best. The sky was cracking open with fireworks, sapphire blue and emerald green, showering light over the thousands of paper boats floating on the bay. The boardwalk was a river of people, the air thick with the smell of grilled squid, sugar and salt. And our stall, the Warm Star Kitchen, was jammed. We were a bright yellow beacon of warmth in the chaos. We had a line 20 people deep, but the plan was working. It was not a faceless transaction. It was a performance of care. Evo was the star. He stood on a small, Vesper-approved wooden box, a serious look on his face, wearing a tiny version of my own apron. With each bowl of steaming corn congee I handed over, he would take a pair of tweezers and meticulously place a single, perfect nori star on top. A star for your wish, he said to a little girl who gig-led and took the bowl. The crowd loved it. They were clapping. They were taking photos, not of the Lucero heir, but of a little boy proudly serving food. He was not a victim. He was the host. Ardan stood just inside the stall's curtained-off back area, watching his son. His face was unreadable, but his shoulders were relaxed for the first time in a week. Mara was a few feet away, her eyes constantly scanning, a radio in her ear. Then the world tore open. It was not the generator. Not yet. It was a vehicle, a staged catering van parked 100 yards away. A deafening boom, not of a bomb, but of a theatrical explosion, followed by a thick, acrid chemical smoke that was not fire. It was gray and orange, and it smelled like burnt plastic and sulfur. Panic! The sound hit first, a single unified scream from 1,000 throats. The river of people reversed. They ran. They shoved. Strollers were knocked over. The music cut out. Now, Ardan's voice was a whip crack. Mara was already moving. She did not run toward the panic. She ran toward a massive industrial fan unit that was part of the festival's cooling system. She hit a switch, and the giant blades roared to life, creating an instant powerful wind corridor, pushing the acrid smoke sideways, away from the main plaza and out over the water. The panic was still spreading. "Ardan, Evo!" I yelled, pulling Evo back from the counter. "Step 1. Papa," Evo said, his voice trembling, but his words clear. He grabbed Ardan's hand. "Good boy. Step 2, Ardan said, pulling him toward the back of the stall, toward the silver-lined, fireproof safety cube Vesper had hidden. But they were too slow. A man burst through the curtain. He was not panicked. He was focused, an Ashen Court operative, his eyes wild, his face smeared with soot. He had ignored the crowd, making a direct line for our stall. He was not aiming for us. He was aiming for the microphone on our PA system. He wanted to amplify the terror, to turn the panic into a stampede. "No one is safe from the court," he roared, lunging for the microphone stand. Evo was between Ardan and the man. I did not think. I grabbed Evo, yanking him back, spinning him around and shielding him with my own body, pushing him into the corner of the stall. "Hold on tight," I screamed. "Become a rock." I saw Ardan's face. He was moving, but the man was closer. Ardan saw me cover his son. I saw the look in his eyes. It was not fear. It was a cold, absolute, murderous fire. The man lunged again. I had nothing in my hands but the large steel ladle I had been using. It was clumsy. I dropped it. My hand hit a small, heavy-bottomed saucepan, the one I use for the caramel. I did not hesitate. I grabbed it and threw it, underhanded, hard, right at the man's knees. The pan connected with a sickening thwack. The operative's legs buckled. He stumbled, his arms windmilling, his roar turning into a grunt of pained surprise. It was the half-second Mara needed. She came over the counter like a predator, a solid black-clad blur. She did not just tackle him, she dismantled him. Her elbow struck his throat, cutting off his air. As he gagged, her knee came up, breaking his grip on the microphone. He fell, and she was on him, a zip-tie cuff cinched around his wrists before he had even registered what happened. "Threat neutralized," she said into her radio, her voice not even strained. Ardan, who had been pulling his own weapon, stopped. He looked at me, still pressed against his son, and the fire in his eyes went out, replaced by something I could not name, something soft, awe. He yanked Evo from me. "Inside. Now," he said. And this time he did not let go until the boy was sealed inside the silver safety box. The chaos outside was still peaking. The fake explosion had been the opening act. Now, as people screamed, the lights on the boardwalk flickered and died, the generator, the EMP. The entire food court was plunged into darkness, lit only by the distant fireworks and the burning, acrid smoke. Children were crying, separated from their parents. Mara was dragging the operative away. Ardan was securing the cube. I was alone at the front of the stall, standing in the dark. I looked at my large 50-gallon pot of congee still steaming over the low pilot flame. I looked at the crowd, blinded and terrified. I was not a target. I was a rescue station. "We are open," I yelled, my voice ripping through the panic. "We are open. The food is hot. If you have a child, come here. If you are lost, come to the light." I grabbed the napkins I had set aside and ran to our water drum, soaking them. A woman stumbled toward me, dragging 2 crying toddlers. "I cannot breathe," she gasped. "Yes, you can," I said, handing her the wet napkins. "Press this to their faces. The smoke is high, the clean air is low. Breathe low. Now, do they want a star?" I moved back to the pot. I grabbed my ladle. I started serving. I just mucked it out, bowl after bowl, into the paper containers. Hot, simple, warm. I did not bother with the toppings. "It is okay," I kept shouting. "It is just food. It is warm. You are safe here." The local New Avalon police were confused, running in circles, their radios dead from the EMP, but Ardon's plan was already in motion. Men in bright yellow festival staff vests, Vesper men, appeared from the shadows. They were not yelling, they were moving, using silent hand signals. They were carrying high-powered, battery-operated lanterns, creating pathways of light. They were not pushing the crowd, they were guiding it, handing out water, moving families toward the safe exit by the pier. The Bayfront Civic Authority, the city's own elite response team, arrived. I saw their commander link up with a Vesper operative. They did not argue. The Vesper man pointed. The authority commander nodded. Ardon's people were not taking over. They were coordinating. They were creating order from the Ashen Court's chaos. Within 30 minutes, the panic was gone. The crowd was not a mob. It was a quiet, orderly procession, evacuating the park. The smoke had cleared. The air was just salty again. The night ended. The festival was over. Our stall was a wreck of spilled food and discarded bowls. But as the last of the families were guided out, they passed our yellow stall, and they clapped. They did not cheer. It was a quiet, tired, grateful applause. My food had not saved them, but it had anchored them. It had been a spiritual shield in the dark. I was wiping my hands on my apron, my entire body shaking with post-adrenaline tremors. When Ardon emerged from the back, Evo was with him, clinging to his hand, but his eyes were wide and curious, not terrified. Ardon walked up to me, standing in the flickering glow of the paper lanterns that still hung from the pier. The fireworks were over. The city was quiet. He just looked at me, standing there in my food-stained apron, my hair a mess. He did not thank me. He did not touch me. He just watched me. A long, profound silence stretching between us. And I saw it in his face. He knew he had lost. He had lost the fight to keep his world and my world separate. He had lost the battle to keep me a secret, to keep me safe and compartmentalized. I was not his employee. I was not his liability. I was in the middle of it, covered in the same grit, and I had not run. He knew he had lost, and in the soft light of the lanterns, I saw in his eyes that it was the most beautiful defeat of his life. We did not go back to Ilexport. We did not go to my apartment. Elias drove the black sedan through the quiet, post-festival streets of New Avalon. The city was settling, exhausted. Evo was fast asleep in his car seat, his face slack and peaceful, his hand still clutching a small, crumpled paper boat. Mara's car followed us, a silent, protective shadow. We drove through gates I had never seen, up a long, winding drive shrouded in ancient trees. This was the true Lucero estate, a place I had only heard about in whispers. But we did not go to the imposing main house that loomed at the top of the hill. Ardon led me, his hand lightly on my back, down a stone path lit by low, warm lamps. He pushed open a heavy wooden door, and we stepped into a different world. It was the Oriole greenhouse. It was not a grand conservatory. It was a private, intimate space. The air was warm, almost humid, and it smelled overpoweringly of ripe oranges, damp earth, and night-blooming jasmine, Small, golden lamps cast a soft glow, illuminating rows of mature citrus trees, their branches heavy with fruit. It was a pocket of impossible, quiet warmth, a shield against the cold, dark city outside. In the center, there was a kitchen, not the industrial steel of Ilex, but a personal one, with a heavy butcher block island, a dark green stove, and copper pots hanging from a rack. Ivo was whisked away to bed by a quiet older woman who must have been his nanny. The adrenaline of the night, the terror and the triumph, had drained away, leaving me feeling hollow and shaky. Ardan looked at me, and he was still in his suit, but it was rumpled, the jacket gone. He looked as exhausted as I felt. "We should eat," he said. It was not a question. It was a shared need. We needed the ritual, the simple grounding work of our hands. He found 2 thick, pearlescent fillets of halibut in the refrigerator. I found a bundle of pencil-thin asparagus. We did not speak. We moved around the small kitchen, a silent, familiar dance. I snapped the woody ends off the asparagus, tossing them in a bowl with olive oil and salt. Ardan went to a shelf in the corner. He did not turn on a radio. He turned on a turntable, a real one. He slipped a vinyl record from its sleeve and set the needle. The speakers crackled, a soft, staticky hiss, and then the space filled with the sound of an old recording, a lone piano, a melancholy, wandering melody, backed by the soft thump-thump of an upright bass. I began to heat a heavy pan on the stove. I was terrified tonight, Ardan, I admitted, my voice sounding very small in the warm, quiet greenhouse. He stopped, his hands full of asparagus, and looked at me. "You were the calmest person on that pier, Juniper." "That was the cook," I said, shaking my head. I looked down at my hands, which were steady now. "The cook knows what to do, but I hate that feeling, the feeling of being a target. I am afraid." I searched for the right words. I'm afraid of being trapped, of losing my small, messy, normal life. I am afraid of losing my freedom. He did not dismiss my fear. He nodded slowly, his expression serious, and turned to lay the asparagus on a baking sheet. "My entire life is a cage. Juniper, a very comfortable, very well-guarded one, but it is a cage nonetheless. I am not afraid of losing my freedom. I do not have it." He turned back to me, his eyes dark. "I am afraid of what they will do to get to me. I am afraid of them touching my weak point." "The ashen court," I said. "No." His voice was low and rough. "Ivo." Our fears met in the middle of the kitchen. My fear of being pulled into his world, his fear of what his world could do to the one person he loved. We were standing in the same small, terrified space. The pan was hot. I laid the fish fillets in, skin side down. They sizzled, a sharp, clean sound. I added a large knob of butter, a few sprigs of thyme. The butter began to foam and spit, turning from pale yellow to a nutty, rich brown. "Tilt the pan," he said, his voice just behind me. I had not heard him move. He was standing directly behind my shoulder. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Tilt it toward you," he instructed. "Now spoon it, baste it." My hand was unsteady, the adrenaline drain making me clumsy. The heavy pan felt awkward. "Here." He did not take it from me. He placed his hand over mine, his fingers wrapping around my own, steadying my grip. His other hand came to rest on my shoulder, a solid, grounding weight. He guided my hand, tilting the pan to the perfect angle, the brown butter pooling. We moved together, a single, coordinated motion, spooning the hot, nutty butter over the fish. He was so close I could smell the faint, clean scent of his shirt and the lingering salt air from the pier. He leaned in, his voice a murmur by my ear. "Just like that. Keep the heat on it. Do not let it burn." His lips, or maybe just his warm breath, brushed the hair at my temple. My heart gave a single, heavy thump. It was too close. It was too intimate. After a night like this, I stopped breathing, my whole body frozen. He must have felt the tension run through me. He finished the motion. Then, very slowly, he stepped back. His hands left my shoulder, left my hand, The cold air of the greenhouse rushed in to fill the space where he had been. Neither of us spoke. The boundary was still there, shimmering and fragile, but we had both leaned our full weight against it. We ate at a small, wrought iron table set against the glass wall, a table barely big enough for two. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall, tapping softly against the hundreds of panes of glass. We did not sit opposite each other. The table was too small, too formal for that. I sat on the small cushioned bench, and he sat down next to me. Our shoulders were pressed together from arm to hip, our knees brushed. The conversation flowed, easy and quiet. We did not talk about the syndicate. We did not talk about the attack. We talked about the first things we ever learned to cook. He told me about a one-eyed fisherman on Pier 9 who had taught him how to fry mackerel in cornmeal when he was 10. I told him about my grandmother, her hands covered in white flour, teaching me how to make arepas in a pan so old it was slick and black. The proximity was warm, not threatening, it was just present. When the plates were empty, we did not move. We just sat, shoulder to shoulder, listening. The vinyl record had finished, leaving only the sound of the rain, a gentle, constant patter on the glass roof, a counterpoint to the quiet thumping of my own heart. I turned my head to look at him. He was already looking at me. The weariness of the night was etched in the lines around his eyes. The gratitude was there, too, and something else, something warmer, deeper. He did not say anything. He lifted his hand and touched my jaw, his thumb brushing my cheekbone, just as he had done on the pier. But this was not a prelude to a chaste kiss on the forehead. He leaned in, and I met him halfway. This kiss was not like the one on the roof. That one had been a question. This was a statement. It was long and deep and coordinated. It was a listening kiss, a conversation without words. I could feel him learning the shape of my mouth, and I was learning his. It was a slow, deliberate release of all the tension, the fear, the adrenaline of the past week. His hand slid from my jaw, down my neck, coming to rest on the small of my back, his fingers pressing gently, pulling me closer. It was not a gesture of ownership. It was an anchor. My own hands found their way up, one resting on his shoulder, the other tangling in the collar of his shirt, my fingers brushing the warm skin of his neck. It was heating up, fast. The soft, gentle intimacy was igniting, the embers of the night turning into something sharp and hungry. I felt the shift, the exact moment it could tip over from comfort into a fire, into something we could not control. I pulled back, just an inch, my breath catching in my throat. He did not chase. He did not push. He stopped, instantly. He rested his forehead against mine, his breathing as unsteady as my own. "If you say stop," he whispered, his voice thick and low, "everything stops, always. You have my word, Juniper." My heart, which had been hammering with a mix of passion and panic, steadied. That promise was more intimate than the kiss itself. He was not a man who took. He was a man who asked. He was giving me the one thing I was most afraid of losing my control, my freedom. "I know," I whispered back. He kept his promise. We did not kiss again. Instead, he took my hand and led me to a simple cushioned sofa in the corner of the greenhouse. We sat, not apart, but leaning into each other. I rested my head on his shoulder. His arm came around me, holding me securely against his side. It was a clean intimacy. The emotions were clear. This was not a boss and his cook. This was not a conquest. This was two very tired, very complicated people finding a moment of absolute peace in a glass house while the world rained outside. We just sat, listening to the rain on the roof, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel like I had to run. After a long time, my phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, buzzed, a sharp, intrusive sound. I went to get it. Ardon watched me. It was a text from Ivo's secure phone. It was a picture. In the photo, his 3 favorite folded napkins, the star, the kite, and his little paper boat were arranged carefully on his pillow. Below it, the text read, "Tomorrow I want a galaxy breakfast." A tired, genuine smile pulled at my lips. A galaxy. Of course. After fireworks and explosions, he wanted the stars. I looked at Ardan, who was watching me with a soft, curious expression. "Galaxy it is," I said, my voice warm, "but right now, he needs to be sleeping." The piece of the greenhouse lasted exactly 12 hours. By the next afternoon, the city was on fire again, but this time, the attack was digital. The Ashen Court, having failed with bombs and intimidation, turned to poison. Waitress linked to festival panic. Lucero's new cook untrained, causes mass sickness. The headlines exploded across social media, fueled by dozens of fake accounts all claiming they had gotten violently ill from my congee. It was baseless, absurd, but it was spreading. By 4 p.m., it was no longer just social media. 2 officials from the Office of Special Culinary and Event Oversight arrived at Ilexport. It was a bureaucratic knife, a fictional agency created to look legitimate. They were here, they said, to investigate the mass poisoning incident. Ardan was vibrating with a cold rage, the same I had seen on the pier, his lawyer. Ravon Calder was present, his face a mask of polite contempt. "This is a harassment tactic," Ravon stated, his voice like ice. "We have a mandate to investigate," the lead inspector said, looking nervous under Ardan's gaze. "We need to see her credentials, her supplier invoices, her temperature logs." Ardan looked at me, ready to have Vesper throw them out. I held up a hand. "It is fine," I said. I walked to my station. I did not give them my credentials from the diner. I gave them the notebook, the one Evo had decorated with stars. "This is my recipe book," I said, my voice calm. "Page 1. Corn congee, ingredients cornmeal, water, salt, squash, all sourced from the Lucero internal, sealed pantry. You will find the invoices in that file." I then pointed to the small, discreet camera in the corner. "That is the kitchen cam. It records 24/7. You can watch the Vesper feed. You will see every pot, every spoon. You will see me wash my hands 47 times. You will see every temperature check. My logs are perfect. I was a cook. My kitchen was clean. My food was safe. They had nothing." The inspectors looked at the notebook, at the camera. They knew they were beaten. They were here for a fight, not for meticulous, documented compliance. They left 30 minutes later, looking defeated. "We sue," Ravon said, the moment the door closed. "Defamation, tortious interference. We will bury the bloggers, and we will find the money that links them to the Ashen Court." "No," I said. Ardan and Ravon both turned to look at me. "No lawsuit," I said, my voice firm. "A lawsuit is a fight. It takes months. It just makes the argument louder. You cannot fight a lie with an argument. You fight a lie with a better truth." "What do you propose, Juniper?" Ardan asked, his voice quiet, intrigued. "I am calling the Harbor Line Gazette, the biggest paper in this city. I am going to invite them to a public cooking demonstration. I am not going to tell them the food is safe. I am going to show them the truth," I said. "Tastes better than a legal argument." Ardan's face tightened. "Absolutely not. A public event. After what happened, it is an invitation. It is too much risk." "It is the only way," I countered, my voice rising to meet his. "This is not about the Ashen Court anymore. This is about Evo. He sees this. He hears the whispers. He knows they are calling my food poison. If I hide, if I let your lawyers fight, what does that teach him? That the fear is real, that the lie is stronger." I jabbed a finger at the star-covered notebook. "Evo's trust needs the light. I am not hiding in the shadows. We are doing this in the sun." He stared at me, the internal war visible on his face, the protector versus the father. The father won. "Oris Bay Community Center," he said. His voice clipped. "Tomorrow, Vesper will own the building before you even step inside." The community center was packed. The Harbor Line Gazette was there. Cameras ready. So were half a dozen local food bloggers and a crowd of curious neighborhood parents. Vesper was everywhere, disguised as center staff, AV technicians, and even parents. My station was simple. a portable burner, a pot, and the exact ingredients from the festival. "My name is June Reyes," I began, my voice clear, amplified by a small microphone. "You've heard a lot of rumors about me. I am not here to talk. I am here to cook." And I did. I made the corn congee. I talked them through the temperature checks. I showed them the sealed bags of ingredients. "But I need an assistant." "Nah," I said, looking off stage. "Chef." Ivo walked out. The room gasped. Ardan Lucero's son. He was wearing his little yellow apron. He was not scared. He was not hiding. He was smiling. "This is my head chef, Ivo," I said. "He designed this recipe. Today, he is in charge of quality control and, most importantly, the toppings." Ivo beamed. He meticulously placed nori stars on the small sample cups. He handed the first one to the lead reporter from the Gazette. The energy in the room shifted. It was not an investigation. It was a cooking class. The phobia that had crippled Ivo, the fear of crowds, was nearly gone. He was laughing, showing a little girl how he cut the stars. The truth was winning. The ride home was light. Ivo was buzzing, recounting every person he had served. He was in the secure car, a modified SUV. With me, Mara was driving, another Vesper agent in the passenger seat. Ardan was in a separate car right behind us, the command vehicle. We were crossing the Lumen Bridge, the long, high bridge that spanned the bay, connecting the downtown port with the residential hills. The lights of New Avalon glittered below. "Look, June, that boat looks like my boat," Ivo said, pointing at a ferry. That is when Mara tensed. "What is that?" "An ambulance." It was coming up fast behind Ardan's car, lights flashing, but the siren was off. "They are not responding to a call," the Vesper agent in the front said, his voice hard. "They are matching our speed." "It is a fake," Mara said, her eyes on her side mirror. "It is a Series 4 chassis, but the reflectivity on the silver cloth paneling is wrong. It is a commercial knockoff. It is them." The Ashen Court, their final, desperate move. The ambulance swerved, slamming its heavy frame into the side of Ardan's car. We watched in horror as his sedan was pushed, scraping against the bridge's guardrail, sparks flying. "They are trying to separate us," Mara yelled. "They are going for us." The ambulance slowed, braking hard, forcing Ardan's car to a halt, boxing him in. A second vehicle, a black utility truck we had not seen, roared up on our left, slamming into our driver's side. Mara fought the wheel, the SUV groaning. "June, get him down," Mara screamed. I grabbed Ivo. "Step 1, Ivo. Now under the seat." He did not panic. He dove, crawling into the specially reinforced space beneath his booster seat. The truck hit us again, hard, our car skewed, hitting the opposite railing. We were trapped. The utility truck's doors burst open. Men in black masks, armed, were piling out. Mara and the other agent had their weapons out, but we were outgunned. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone. I fumbled, opening the secure chat group Ardan had set up for the three of us. The one Ivo had named with 3 emojis, a star, a kite, a boat. My thumbs flew. I did not text Ardan. I texted Ivo. Step 2, pull the red strap. Under the seat, I heard a muffled grunt, then the click of a heavy latch. The red strap was the emergency release for the floor escape hatch, a Vesper modification. Step 3, blow the star whistle, now. The whistle was a high-frequency beacon, silent to human ears, that Vesper units tracked. "They are coming," Mara yelled as the men reached our doors. The back door of the SUV was yanked open. I shielded my head. But no one was there. From under the car, I heard a thump as Ivo dropped to the pavement. "Where is the kid?" one of the men roared. Ivo did as he had been taught. He did not run. He slid, flat on his stomach, under the SUV, toward the middle of the bridge, into the narrow, dark space beneath the trapped cars. The chaos was absolute. The Ashen Court men were confused, searching the SUV. Ardan, free from his car, was now engaged in a brutal, close-quarters fight. Then I saw them. A Vesper retrieval team. They had come from under the bridge, rappelling up from a hidden maintenance platform. They were silent. black-clad ghosts. One of them scooped up Ivo, who was still blowing his whistle, and secured him. "We have the asset." The fight was over in seconds. The Ashen Court, caught between Ardon's fury and the Vesper team, was neutralized. I scrambled out of the car, my knees buckling. The Vesper agent set Ivo down. Ivo ran to me. "June?" He slammed into my stomach, his arms locking around my waist. I grabbed him, pulling him so tight I thought I might break him. I buried my face in his hair, and for the first time in my adult life, I just sobbed. I cried from sheer, bone-deep terror and a relief so profound it was painful. He was safe. He was safe. I heard heavy, running footsteps on the asphalt. "Ardon?" He arrived, a half-beat late, his weapon still in his hand, his face a mask of primal terror. He stopped dead. He did not see his cook. He did not see his employee. He saw me, on my knees on the cold bridge, clinging to his son. He saw his son, his arms wrapped just as tightly around me. Ardon lowered his gun. He looked at us, the two halves of his world, fused together by fear and relief, and the wall I had been so afraid of, the one between his world and mine, did not just disappear, it ceased to matter. He looked at me, and I was not an outsider anymore. I was family. The kidnapping attempt on the Lumen Bridge was the Ashen Court's final, fatal mistake. It was too brazen, too public, and it failed too spectacularly. With the public on edge and the media demanding answers, the city's facade cracked. Ardon Lucero, working in tandem with the Special Disciplinary Bureau, moved with chilling precision. Vesper sealed Pier 3 at 4 a.m., cutting off all escape routes. The SDB, armed with federal warrants based on Vesper's intel, went in hard. By the time the rest of New Avalon was pouring its morning coffee, the entire leadership of the Ashen Court was in custody. The war was over. The Harborline Gazette, which had been so quick to print the poisoning rumors, had a new front page. Tate had it laminated and hung behind the counter at the Blue Comet. The headline screamed, "Kitchen becomes fortress, waitress saves festival, thwarts syndicate kidnapping." The story was everywhere. The anonymous poisoning claims vanished. I was no longer a person of interest. I was in the strange, fickle narrative of the city, a folk hero. The public opinion had not just shifted, it had performed a complete reversal. The city settled into a tense peace. The 2-week contract was a joke, a relic from a different lifetime. I did not ask, and Ardon did not offer. It was just understood. I had my shift at the Blue Comet, which was now protected by a state-of-the-art Vesper security system. Compliments of a satisfied customer. As Tate put it, the rest of my time was at Ilexport. A week after the bridge, Ardon found me in the Ilex kitchen. I was teaching Ivo how to braid dough for bread. "Tonight," he said, his voice quiet, pulling my attention, "Ivo and I would like to invite you to dinner. Galaxy Night." "Is that the new restaurant by the pier?" I asked, dusting flour from my hands. A small, rare smile touched his lips. "It is a private event, on the roof, Ivo's request." When I stepped onto the roof of the Ilex warehouse that evening, I stopped breathing. The chaotic space of our first dance was gone. He had strung thousands, maybe tens of thousands, of tiny, pinprick LED lights, creating a dense, glittering canopy that looked less like a decoration and more like a captured nebula. Below, the city lights of New Avalon glittered, a mirror image of the sky he had built. There was one small table set for 3. "You wanted a galaxy, Captain," I said, my voice soft. Ivo, dressed in a small suit that matched his father's, ran to the table. "Did you make it, June?" I did. I brought out the food. It was a callback, a final healing of the memory that had started it all. I set down a large, warm tureen of the corn and squash congee, but beside it, I set down the universe. In small white bowls, I had the toppings. I had crushed dark, bittersweet chocolate cookies into a fine, black space dust. I had sliced starfruit and bright, sweet mangoes, arranging them in swirls like nebulae. and I had a small, clear pitcher of golden honey. Comet trails, Ivo whispered in awe. He grabbed a bowl and began to create, piling on the dust and the fruit, drizzling the honey. He took a huge bite, his face a mess of chocolate and joy, and he laughed. It was the sound of a child who was finally safe. We ate, the city a silent movie below us. When Ivo was finished, he ran to the reinforced glass barrier at the roof's edge, a safe, Vesper-installed wall, and began to fly his paper toys in the wind. Ardan and I were left at the table, the soft piano music from the greenhouse playing from a small speaker. "He is healed," I said quietly, watching him. "You healed him," Ardan replied. He turned in his chair, his body angled toward me, his expression serious. The festive lights were gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, profound intensity. "Juniper, I know what you are afraid of." I held his gaze. "I'm afraid of being caged." "I know." He paused, searching for the words. "I do not want to lock you in. I want to walk with you, my world. It is what it is, but I need you to know. If it ever becomes too much, if I ever become too much, you are free. If you ever want to leave, I will not stop you. I will have Mara and a full Vesper team escort you to any city on this earth. You will be safe, and you will be free. That is my promise to you." He was offering me the one thing no one else in his life had: a clean, guaranteed escape, the one thing I thought I would have to fight for. I looked at him, at this powerful, dangerous man who had just handed me my own freedom on a silver platter. I shook my head slowly. "I do not need a cage, Ardan," I said. "I just need an open window. I just need to know the air is there." He looked past me, not at the city, but at the vast, dark expanse of the bay, where the container ships, like distant, slow-moving stars, glided toward the open sea. He gestured to the water. "The window," he said, "is always there." A soft mist began to fall, a gentle coastal rain that made the LED stars blur and shimmer. It was cold. Ardan stood, and the piano music swelled, a sad, slow, beautiful melody. He held out his hand. "We never finished our dance. Juniper?" I took his hand. This time, there was no 2-foot gap. There was no polite placement of hands. I stepped into his space, and his arms wrapped around me, pulling me flush against the solid wall of his chest. I felt the steady beat of his heart. I rested my head on his shoulder, my own arms wrapping around his back, and we just swayed, a slow, 2-step shuffle on a wet roof under a sky of electric stars. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. His hands came up to frame my face. He kissed me. It was not the tentative question on the roof. It was not the grateful press on my forehead. This was a statement. This was a deep, slow unfolding of all the terror and all the trust we had built. It was a listening kiss, a conversation of respect. It was the taste of rain and warmth and the promise of safety. His hands moved, one tangled in my damp hair, the other pressing firmly into the small of my back, anchoring me to him. I met his fire, my fingers gripping the lapels of his suit. It was a controlled burn, a passion that was deep and real, but one that respected the boundary. We both knew the line. We stopped, breathless, resting our foreheads together as the rain fell around us. "Papa June, look." The moment broke. We turned, laughing, separating but not letting go. His arms still locked around my waist. Ivo was running toward us, his face bright with excitement. He was holding a piece of kitchen twine. Tied to it, like a strange, beautiful flag, were his 3 paper creations: the star, the kite, and the boat. He held it up, and the wind caught it, making it fly. We were not a couple. We were not a boss and his cook. We were this strange, broken, and beautiful little family, laughing on a roof in the rain. Ardan reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small keychain. It was not a grand, ornate crest. It was a simple, heavy-duty electronic fob. "This is not," he said, his voice soft, as he pressed it into my palm. the key to the mansion. I looked at it. I recognized the Vesper logo. It was the master key, the alpha key for the Ilex Port kitchen. "You are the head chef," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely showed. "Of this family's heart, it is only right you have the keys to the kitchen." My fingers closed around the key, warm from his hand. As if on cue, the sky over New Avalon exploded. A concussive boom echoed across the water, not of violence, but of joy. The rescheduled fireworks from the festival, huge, crackling peonies of red and gold, scattering light across the bay. Ivo cheered, clapping his hands. Ardan pulled me to his side, his arm securely around my waist. The three of us stood together, watching the sky burn, the final knot, the one I had been carrying since the first night at the diner, the fear of his world, the fear of being trapped. It just untied. It dissolved into the rain. I looked up at him, the colored light of the fireworks playing across his strong, handsome face. "Stay," I said. It was not a question. It was not a plea. It was a statement. He looked down at me, and the smile he gave me was brighter and more explosive than anything in the sky. He nodded. He leaned down and kissed my forehead, a promise of respect, a promise of boundaries. We were not a normal love story. We would never be. But we had found our peace. We had built our boundaries, forged in fire and fear, and now we were going to guard them together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments. We would love to connect and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button to help this story reach more listeners.